Hey there! We are the Leadership Lab team, and we're exploring the practical application of leadership concepts and achieving excellence.
We go beyond the classroom. We take these concepts into the wild and learn about challenges and triumphs of leaders applying these ideas in their leadership journeys.
And this is Mastery Talks, the podcast where we bridge the gap between academic knowledge and real-world leadership challenges. In each episode, we dive deep into the groundbreaking research and teachings of Stanford GSB faculty, exploring the foundational concepts that power the elite courses.
Join us on this journey, share your leadership stories, and together, let's master the art of leadership excellence.
Hello and welcome, dear leaders, to a special live session of our Mastery Talks podcast. I'm your host, Yana, joined by my co-host, Juliana. We're thrilled to have you today with us as we embark on a journey of discovery, exploration, and most importantly, mastery in leadership. Today, we have the distinct honor of introducing a remarkable individual whose work has left an indelible mark on the landscape of leadership development. Dr. Jennifer Aaker, a Stanford professor in Power of Story, Humor Serious Business, AI for Human Well-Being. Jennifer co-authored best-selling books like The Dragonfly Effect and Humor Seriously. Jennifer's work earned accolades, including the Distinguished Scientific Achievement Award and MBA Professor of the Year. Today, we are going to dive deep into some of the core themes of Professor's research and how they intersect with the practical world of leadership. Dr. Aaker, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Aaker, to kick things off, could you take us back to the beginning of your academic pursuits? What motivated you to dive into the world of academia and scientific exploration?
Well, I think like for most people, I don't know if I had this I woke up, I turned 3 and I said, I'm going to be a professor and study, behavioral science. It's really a journey. And as a young person, I was really nerdy. I dreamt with as a soothing mechanism, I would actually do sort of algebra in my head, like derivatives. And, I didn't really like geometry, but I liked math. And so I would actually dream in math. I would be very nerdy and read science books. And I think that kind of set the path for, a degree of really liking quantitative information, but also liking the process of discovery. And I guess the second thing I would say is I have just remarkable parents. One is a scientist, and that certainly inspired me. The other is a teacher and a hospice volunteer, among many other things. And that's my mom. And so I would, as a young child with 2 sisters, would sit around the dinner table talking about what people wish for in their last days of life, because as a hospice volunteer, that was my mom's work, right? So she would share these stories of people who passed on and had no regrets and had so much joy in their being. And then there were individuals who had regrets, and her job was to listen to them, or to maybe see if she could mitigate them, or find something that they wished for. And I remember being so strongly influenced by this and noting that when people did have regrets, it usually fell into a few different categories. One, they wished that they had been bolder and taken more risks. They wished they'd been more authentic, true to themselves. They also wished that they'd been more present and really savored more. They wished that they had not taken themselves so seriously, had more humor in their life. And love. They wish they had the chance to say, I love you one more time. And I remember that really put me down on this path of understanding who are these people who have joy in their hearts when they pass on, and who are those who have regrets. And I think a big way that I kind of parse, or one way that I parse that was individuals that I think were chasing happiness, short-run happiness throughout their life, really fell into that latter category. But those who are grounded on meaning and purpose somehow seem to get more life out of their life. And that's what put me on this path.
And that's remarkable to hear about your journey, Professor. It seems like your path into academia was almost predestined. Now let's delve deeper into your impressive work and talk a bit about your research on happiness and meaning in life. You've discovered that happiness and meaning are distinct yet related aspects, and how happiness is often associated with an easier life, while meaning might come from facing challenges and difficulties. Could you expand more on this concept, and do these differences ever create a contradiction between the pursuit for meaning and the search for happiness?
Yeah, I mean, the concepts of happiness and meaning are often intertwined. And in fact, somewhere between, I don't know, depends on what age you are, but like somewhere between 40 to 70% of those two concepts really overlap. And especially if you get older and wiser, you start to realize what actually brings you happiness is true meaning, right? But when you're younger, that's not so much the case. And we can pull them apart in a few ways. The way that I like to do it, the way I like to do it is by simply asking people, to what degree do you feel like you have a happy life? And people rate it on a 1 to 7 scale. And then to what degree do you feel like you have meaning in your life or a meaningful life? And again, they'll rate it on the same scale. And what I do with my co-authors is we will basically get large amounts of data where people are asked those types of questions, and we'll, simply correlate the answers at an aggregate level, and then parse out the people that say that they have a happy and meaningful life versus those that say they have a happy but not meaningful life, and people have a meaningful but not happy life. By the way, there's not a lot of individuals who fall into that category of not happy, not meaning. And one misperception of individuals who are deeply sad and lonely and maybe even contemplating suicide is that they're not happy, but in fact, it's that they lack meaning in their life. So the real challenge is these individuals who don't feel like they have meaning. Anyway, so what we'll do is we'll really focus on those individuals who say they have happiness but not a lot of meaning in their life, or people have a lot of meaning and not happiness. And we'll figure out what are the things that they do or say or are that are different. And we'll find that there's many differences in those two groups, but 3 of them maybe most important are people who really prioritize or say that they're happy, but not a lot of meaning. They tend to be more self-focused. They tend to be more focused on how am I feeling right now? And they really want to feel good all of the time and not feel bad any of the time. Meaning mindset people, or people that rate high on meaning in their life, but maybe not a lot of happiness, they tend to be more anchored on what actually creates lasting meaning in their life. They're much more anchored on others, not just themselves. And they understand that negative emotions often define life. That's actually what gives meaning to life. And so they're not always trying to optimize for short-run happiness and mitigate or minimize negative emotions. They're really leading their lives and spending time in ways that are really fundamentally different.
Wow, what an amazing classification and really amazing insights. And from your perspective, how does storytelling tie into this quest for meaning?
Well, what I found is, it's easy to say like, oh, Juliana, go have a meaningful life. And you would like to have that too, right? But it's hard to execute on it, especially in the day-to-day. And one way I started understanding the neuroscience and social science of story is with a very practical lens. And that is, how do you get individuals, myself included, my kids included, to actually not say, I just want a happy life, to really say, I just want a meaningful life. We always hear, parents say, I just want my kids to be happy, but our research implies that actually is a misguided way of parenting. Easier said than done. So what you can do, both for yourselves and others, is say, what are the stories that I'm living today? Or what stories do I want to share and live and co-create in my life? What stories do I want to harness at work? And the reason why story is such a powerful frame for people, both in the short run and in the long run, by simply asking, what are the stories that define you, is because it unplugs you from this quest for relentless positivity and instead anchors you on this idea of, challenges and growth and transformation that you might be able to have, because by definition, stories are not about winning, winning, winning. Stories are about winning and then losing and then trying again. So they really have an arc to them. And once you start to realize that you have to have those deeply negative experiences in order to have stories define your life, you make decisions in a very different way. So I found story to be this really powerful tool that allows people to better understand what would be a meaningful life.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now, when it's clear how storytelling can be a powerful meaning creator, I'd like to delve into another part of your research. I was personally fascinated by your work on awe. And turns out those moments when you feel overwhelmed by the beauty or vastness of something, they have a power to transform us, if it's fair to say. Could you elaborate on this idea and share more about your findings in this area?
Absolutely. So to kind of contextualize this research, I mentioned that one thing people often regret in their last days of life is, boldness and authenticity. People wish that they had been bolder and taken more risks and better understood what was true to them. And so you would think, well, all right, that can't be a significant challenge. I will simply be bolder and more authentic. But it's quite hard to do. Humans really aren't necessarily wired to even understand how much bold change they're able to actually, manifest or live in their life. By the way, boldness isn't about being fearless. It's about being open to change, right? And finding your own self in that journey. Now, part of the reason why people don't seem to do that as much as they should is because we're not really capable of imagining our potential for change. Some of my co-authors and other colleagues have written really formative work showing that people, for example, when they reflect on how much they've changed in the past 10 years, their preferences, their values, et cetera, they say they've changed so much. But when they're asked to guess how much change they'll actually incur in the next 10 years, they don't think it'll change that much. Partly because it's really hard to imagine that. And when we do imagine that, it oftentimes feels daunting or fearful or anxiety-ridden, because it activates the amygdala, which kind of creates this sense of fear. So the question is, how do we get over that? And one thing I love about this body of work on awe by Aaker, Keltner, and others that we built on was awe is this mindset of allowing people to have this sense of reverence that overwhelms you. And when you have that moment of awe, you often can actually act in bolder ways. So I'll define awe here. It's really this feeling of transcendence and a feeling of overwhelmness. It takes over your thoughts. You often feel as a human quite small, and yet what you're experiencing is quite vast and overwhelming. And so in studies where subjects are shown images that evoke awe, including our own studies, this is work with Melanie Rudd and Kathleen Voss, we'll show people pictures of Yosemite or the night sky, et cetera, versus images that evoke happiness, like puppy dogs or babies. And then we'll ask them a set of questions, and we'll find in that work that people are less impatient. They're more likely to serve others or do pro-social acts. They are less materialistic, so they make choices that are more experiential, less materialistic, and they say they felt better in the moment. Other research also shows that they're about 10% more likely to open up or experience moments of openness where they can act with bolder ways. And here's the thing, it's not that hard, right? You can go on what many say is a awe walk, like just go outside and experience, like look up at the night sky or look up at trees. You can experience it when you see a piece of art or you hearing certain music. For everyone, it might be slightly different, but it's not something that is expensive or hard to get. And it's really different from other positive emotions. So your physical face changes, like your eyebrows go up, you have this audible inhale. So everyone do this with me. Eyebrows go up. Come on, I'm looking at you. Your jaw drops. You have this audible inhale. And even, by the way, the physiological changes that your face make when you experience awe can actually help you experience awe. In fact, even remembering the last time you had awe can give you this. And there's a neurological shift. So awe really just opens you up and resets you, shifting your awareness from the day-to-day to a different way of understanding the world. So I don't know if that answered your question perfectly, but that's the context for which I found our work on awe so important and exciting.
I don't know how other leaders, but I'm experiencing goosebumps right now.
Yes, goosebumps, another thing to like be on the lookout for.
Yeah, exactly. And can I ask you, so you mentioned music and visuals and like experience, like walks, but how like does storytelling, like stories, do they evoke, like when we're reading them or when we're telling them, can they be a powerful tool to evoke this feeling of awe within ourselves and also in others?
Absolutely. You know how you hear, I mean, it's not just TED Talks that you might listen to, but a personal friend might share a story and all of a sudden your breath is taken away and you look at things differently. So I'll give you two examples. One example is actually quite personal. About a decade ago, I was teaching this creativity and innovation class. By the way, I always wanted to be an oncologist. I never really said I want to be a professor. But I felt like my skills were really well matched to being an academic, a behavioral scientist. And so I went that route. But I always wanted to be an oncologist. My grandfather died of cancer. I feel like most people have been touched by cancer, and I wanted to make it a positive impact. But I also really wanted to be a great mom and friend and partner. And so this academic path allowed me to be all of those things. And I didn't see that path with being an oncologist. So 10 years ago, listening to a story by my student about what he learned in this creativity class, and he shares with me the story of his best friend who had leukemia. And instead of listening to doctors who said there's no match in the bone marrow registry, and so therefore no chance of saving his life, my student reversed the rules and actually said, well, if I can run bone marrow registries in the next year, how many people do I need to get in the registry to find a match for him probabilistically? And the doctor said, you need 25,000 people to find a match. And Robert said, okay, I will start running drives. And the doctor said, just one problem, and you have weeks to get this done because we need to find a perfect match immediately. So Robert harnessed the power of story and social networks and got over 25,000 people in the bone marrow registry. It did take him a couple months. They found a perfect match for Samir, his best friend. It did, but because it did take 11 weeks, it didn't take, and Samir did pass on. But out of the 25,000 people or more that Robert got in the registry, they matched in 1 year alone with over 240 people who needed matches. And all of those matches were immediate. So that means Samir's life and Robert's actions, like I'm getting goosebumps again. It's from, I've lived with this story. it didn't just impact those 241 people. It impacted 241 families and countless people around them. And that story created so much awe for me that it completely, forked my life. And I went and I actually started studying what Robert did and the power of stories and the power of social networks and how you make change. And it had this extraordinary impact on me. And by the way, it impacted me so much that we actually spent a year trying to run more bone marrow registries and got over 100,000 people on the bone marrow registry in honor of Samir's legacy. So that's just a personal story, but we've all heard those stories that weirdly or maybe irrationally touch us in ways that we just changed the way we live. The second story I'll share, and that kind of like segues us into this work on humor and levity, I think too, is that I think people often think that awe has to be this big serious thing, right? And meaning and purpose are baked into it, but they can be found in small, vulnerable stories or stories that evoke humor. One of my favorite there is Secretary of State Madeleine Albright came into our class at Stanford, and it was the Humor Seriously class, serious business class. And she shares this story with the students where she has this personal love for jewelry. And so, and she was telling the students how she was negotiating the Russian foreign minister and had heard right before her negotiations started that they had bugged this US State Department, which is this serious breach in international diplomacy. And so she walks in deciding to wear a bug pin. It was this big. It was literally 3 inches big. She happened to have it because she has this bug, pin collection. Anyway, and he couldn't help but smile. And she shares with the students that it just changed the energy in the room. Like the tension just diffused. And it allowed him to, talk to her as Madeleine, not Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. And so it just had this enormous impact on that conversation, which has ripple effects. That is an awe-evoking story. And it's not that, but it had a humor and some humanity in it. So when we look for those stories, I think we want to keep our eye on humor and levity as well.
Right, that's great that you touched this topic, as we are curious to dive into your research on humor and levity in workplace and leadership. And I'd like to ask you to share some insights from your work there and how humor can be a valuable asset in a work environment for leaders.
Absolutely. So I know we're sort of short on time, so I'm popping a link into the chat, and that's just Naomi Bagdonis and our 9-minute TED Talk. So it really kind of nails this question. So spend 9 more minutes and go there. But I will share a couple things that aren't in that talk. Number one, people have these misperceptions of what humor is. They think it's the same thing as being funny. It is not. It is not about being funny. It's about understanding your own humor style. And we find that there's 4 different styles. There's the stand-ups that are loud and boisterous. There's the sweethearts that are earnest, honest, and understated. There's snipers that are edgy, sarcastic, masters of the unexpected dig. And then there's magnets who are big and charismatic and sort of silly and physical with their humor. And so what's important about this is that we're all humorous. It's just that you have to understand your own authentic style of humor. And you have to ask your team, what is your authentic sense of humor? And I'm going to pop into the chat too, a 2-minute quiz where everyone can figure out what their own style is and ask their kids and their teammates. Because once you understand why someone else laughs, you understand them so much more authentically. And once you understand what makes you laugh, you understand yourself more authentically. And then you can use your humor as Madeleine or Secretary of State Madeleine Albright did. And also it helps you mitigate risk because people are worried about, misfiring or alienating people. And we find that, for example, snipers and stand-ups, they're at risk to inadvertently alienate someone because they use humor as a sign of affection. I'm teasing you because I like you, but it doesn't always land that way. And magnets and sweethearts, they're at risk to over-index on self-deprecation, which is a super powerful tool, making fun of yourself to lift others, but only at high levels of status. At lower levels of status, it can really boomerang. And the last thing I'll say on the humor side of things, especially for leaders, even if they don't consider themselves funny, is that this isn't about being funny. It's about just noticing truth and kind of saying it with some levity, and then knowing how to mitigate risks. So never ask yourself, will this make me sound funny? Always ask, how will this make others feel? Also, don't punch down, which is making fun of someone of lower status. And then always check your distance. So I can make fun of my mom, but not like, Juliana's mom, who I'm sure is wonderful, Juliana. So those are ways that you can operationalize this stuff.
Jennifer, thank you for your insights. Time is flying. Oh my God. And we have to, I think, let's shift focus to the research we've conducted within the Stanford Lead community. We've been examining the practical application of the skills acquired through Lead, including the art of storytelling. Juliana, let's take a moment to recap our research findings.
Sure. So we are very grateful to our community who contributed these questions. And we have questions in the intersection of storytelling, the way our minds engage with it, and its place in the business landscape. And since we don't have much time, I just want to thank Tanu, Luigi, Ravindra, and Apur for their questions. And so the first question was, why our minds are so receptive to stories, right? The neuroscience behind it. And maybe you can just point us into the direction like you did with your video, or like what we can read or on that.
Oh my gosh, perfect. I'll do that. This one's actually a 4-minute video, so there's no reason to not see it, but it really does go into the neuroscience of the persuasion of story and why it actually, playing it right now. Here we go. And so, but in short, this idea is that when you share a story, or even you just say the words like, let me tell you a story, it basically activates the Broca's and the Wernicke's area. And these are regions in the brain that are involved in language comprehension and production. And so, and when I say just do something, those areas aren't activated. So it gives you focused attention, increases memorability, and sometimes people even get into flow states where these engaging stories can induce that sense that time passes quickly and we're fully immersed in the narrative. So, and that's it's a very sort of universal way of responding to stories.
Thank you so much. So let's skip to the next question, and it's on how do we balance brevity and storytelling in our work environments, right? Because today's workplace, and let's make this our probably last question for the day, how do we balance the need for clarity and concise communication that workplaces demonstrate, and actually the need to tell stories because they resonate more deeply with people?
Terrific. Okay, so I would say number one, you can share stories in just 6 words, and I'll pop into the chat some ways. If you look at Larry Smith's work, he actually does this in a really beautiful way in a TEDx talk. But even just sharing 6-word titles at the beginning of a meeting or an end of a meeting is really, really useful. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he starts his leadership meetings off on Fridays with his 20 direct reports, having stories of awe. And he'll have a direct report, just share 15 minutes, not long, of a story that evoked awe for them and the data behind it. And that completely shifts the whole rest of the way of navigating that leadership meeting, because it really allows people to be fully engaged in a very personal way. And then they migrate all 20 different people actually bring these stories to the group. So those are 2 tips. But can I leave the group with a few like final comments? Okay,
Yes,
terrific.
Please.
All right. So number 1, I just popped into the chat. Here are 5 questions from our research that I think are really important, and just have you ask yourselves them every day, or, potentially every, year. And that is, these questions are really intended to make people understand, are they creating, meaningful life? One is fun. What elevates you? As things come down the pike, ask yourself, is this a hell yes, or is it a no? And you really want to say yes to the hell yeses. The second is ask yourself, the things that are coming down the pike, is it truly fulfilling? Am I doing what I was put on this planet to do? And the third is balance. Am I keeping all of my selves attended? Am I being a great parent or son or daughter, a friend, an athlete, a spiritual being, and, excelling at work? And then fourth, am I making a difference in the lives of others? Am I really aligned with that higher purpose? And then fifth, do I have space in my life for beauty, for awe, for humor, and for spontaneity? And if you're not, you can say no to some of those, but not for the long run. You really have to keep each of those 5 things sort of in check. And so I will encourage that, and I'll leave a last little video in case it's interesting, of Stephen Curry, who asks himself these questions on a regular basis. So with that, thank you so much. I am so honored to be here with all of you here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Professor. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear all your insights about humor, storytelling, and all that amazing feelings that we're taking with us for the next season.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And if anyone has access to all of the videos that I just popped in to the chat, maybe you could collect them and then share them out with a broader group. I'm happy to follow up too. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jenny.
so much, Professor. Okay, so Jana, last words.
Dear leaders, was so nice to see all of you. And this is not the last episode of Mastery Talks, but just the first one. So stay tuned and keep working on your excellence as we're doing the same.
Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to join Leadership Lab. We will share the link as well. Subscribe to our Mastery Talks, and stay tuned for more inspiring conversation on leadership, personal growth, strategy. We will have more talks. And until next time, pursue excellence and master your leadership journey. And thanks to Jana, my fantastic and fabulous co-host, for doing this interview today.
Thank you, Juliana.